Variant and Criterion Dungeons. This has been something that I've been excited to check out pretty much ever since Yoshi P talked about them in one of the live letters where he said, oh, these are going to be like scalable dungeons. And even though in my head, I was thinking, ooh, Mythic Plus, like the things that he was saying did not necessarily equate to Mythic Plus, and still don't, by the way. Even though I might put Mythic Plus in the title of this video, this is not Mythic Plus. What this has been adapted into is essentially more challenging 4-player content. Not the variant dungeons, but the Criterion ones. Because initially, the whole plan was just, oh, we're going to have these dungeons that are going to have a couple of different routes that you can take, and these are going to be like a little bit of an experience that you can have with either 4 players, or you can do them solo, and they're still going to be maybe a little bit challenging. That was kind of like the idea that I got from it. But since then, due to the fact that, there's been a lot of people in the player base that kind of like me have been saying, bro, I would really like to have 4-player, really challenging content. Some of you guys might be wondering, why? Because I can't always get 8 players on my schedule to just like team up with me to go do something more challenging. It's just really that simple, because not all of us are going to have a schedule that allows for like a static. Even in my specific case where we actually formed the static to progress through Pandemonium Savage, Asphodelo Savage specifically, is like, our static raids really late comparatively to most of the people, at least from my experience. Like, I seem to believe that most people like either raid between 5 p.m. and like 7 p.m. or something like that. That at least has been my experience back in my World of Warcraft days. I don't know exactly how things work in 14 because I never really looked too much to do a static until I got a couple of friends that were interested in, getting one together, because I kind of feel like in order to do a static, you need to at least have a strong base of a couple of players that you know reasonably well that are going to stick with it no matter what, because otherwise I kind of feel like it's fairly easy for a static to potentially disband. That's just like the vibe that I get, right? So our static raids at like 9:30 p.m. from 9:30 p.m. to 11:30 p.m., which is very, very late. The reasoning behind that is because usually 9:30 p.m. is kind of like when I'm done putting the kids to bed, all of that stuff. And then I have like a little bit of free time when I can, do things. And usually those will be, the nights where I'll be able to raid with my friends. And unfortunately, throughout the day, even though, I'm creating content and all of that stuff, there's usually not that many people available to go do Savage with me. And I don't want to go into Party Finder because that's just not my jam. I like to go in and I like to experience things like fresh and blind and figure out the puzzle, as opposed to watching a video on YouTube and going in already knowing what the strategy is. That is not nearly as interesting to me. So having a dungeon that is 4-player content, that is more challenging, and Yoshi P said they're going to be doing more of these, is something that I've always wanted to have, and it is the main thing that I miss from World of Warcraft as as someone who has played World of Warcraft in the past, and I will go check out Dragonflight when that comes out and whatnot, but it's neither here nor there. As someone who has played World of Warcraft in the past, Mythic Plus is one of my favorite activities in World of Warcraft. I realize that, not everybody cares that much about Mythic Plus. It's whatever. I really like it. I just really like dungeons. And the reason I like Mythic Plus is because Mythic Plus is like dungeons taken to the extreme. It's like, challenging dungeons on the level of like almost raids, which is really cool because it's, small party of players goes in, has an adventure. Now there's going to be 3 flavors when it comes to these dungeons. There's going to be flavor number 1, variant dungeons. Now they have a couple of more details in the slides that I have here. As you can see, variable difficulty dungeons, previously introduced as Criterion Dungeons. So initially they were announced as Criterion, but these are actually now called variant. Level 90 casual play for 1 to 4 players, 4-player party when matched. So you can go in solo if you want. You can go in with 2 players. This is another thing that I think is cool. Just being able to go in with 1 or 2 friends, I think is cool, as opposed to just like filling out the party. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I would like to see, I don't know if this would ever be possible, but one of the things that I'd like to see is to be able to like, how you have trusts, right? I think it would be cool if you were able to go with like 2 players and 2 trusts. 3 players and 1 trust. I think that would be an interesting thing, as opposed to just being locked out for one player, and because sometimes you don't want to engage with random people, you just want to be with like a friend, and you want to just like both of you chill out, enjoy a dungeon. And right now there isn't really like a proper way of doing that. Not like there's a big reason anyways, because dungeons currently in 14 are mega easy. I mean, most of the current endgame dungeons, pretty much since like Stormblood, even a lot of dungeons in Heavensward, it's pretty much 2 pulls a wall, 2 pulls a wall, and then a boss fight. Then 2 pulls a wall, and when I say 2 pulls, I mean 2 packs, not really 2 pulls, because you get both packs in one pull. So it's like 2 packs in a wall, 2 packs in a wall, boss fight, 2 packs in a wall, 2 packs in a wall, boss fight. And that's kind of like the formula that they've been doing for dungeons, which is all right, but it's extremely linear, and it gets a little bit boring pretty fast, right? Like, I still find enjoyment in doing these instances, but ultimately, like, you know, I want something more when it comes to dungeons, and this is what this is going to allow. But anyways, no role restrictions, job changes permitted. Interesting. I actually don't even remember reading this. You can change your jobs in the dungeon instantly. And interesting. Enemy strength determined by party size. So again, this scales based on whether you have 2 players, 3 players, 4 players, whatever. Route of progression branches based on player action. Now, this is really cool for the variant dungeons. I really like this because the way that this is going to work out, we're gonna see in a screen up ahead, and I'll talk about it then. The first variant dungeon is going to be the Sildin Subterrane. Explore the depths alongside a certain someone. Experience a different story depending on your chosen paths. All stories may be enjoyed via multiple playthroughs. So this is a dungeon that actually has branching paths. As opposed to the traditional 3 bosses that you tend to have in regular dungeons, you're going to have 2 bosses whenever it comes to variant dungeons. So it's going to be a little bit of a faster experience. But these dungeons are going to have multiple branching paths, and I think they even talked about potentially being able to like pull a lever or something. And when you pull a lever, you might give a boss additional abilities, or you might actually nerf the boss a little bit, make it easier to deal with. And all of these actions that you take within the dungeon are going to lead to potentially different outcomes. Again, this is something that is really cool because it gives you a reason to go through the dungeon, and it gives you different routes, and it gives you, I'm assuming, a couple of different cutscenes that you experience as you go through this. And that just sounds like an interesting system, as opposed to the usual traditional linear dungeons that we have. You actually being able to pick a different path every time you go through the dungeon. These are also going to include variant actions. These are duty actions designed to compensate for role imbalances. So, for instance, if you don't have a healer, you're going to be able to equip a heal. If you don't have a tank, you're going to be able to equip a rampart. So there's an interesting thing here going on here. Access to it at a time with the ability to change mid-duty. Actions have recast timers, but no other limits on usage. These cannot be changed during battle or while recast timer is on cooldown. So you can change your variant actions throughout the dungeon as well. So here are the current variant actions. We have variant cure, which, as you can see, it's definitely done to compensate for a lack of a certain role, because variant cure can only be equipped by tank or DPS, because, if you had a healer, you wouldn't need variant cure. Variant ultimatum provokes nearby enemies. Anybody can do that. This is kind of like the juggle aggro. I find it interesting that even the tank can equip variant ultimatum. I almost feel like this one should not be available to the tank, but whatever. Then you have variant raise. So this is basically a raise that you can have in the dungeon itself. Again, not available to healer because it's to compensate for the fact that you do not have a healer. Variant spirit dart. This is to compensate for the lack of DPS. It's probably a heavy damage ability. And variant rampart, which those of you who play tanks, rampart is a damage reduction, 20% damage reduction. I don't know how much the percentage is for variant rampart, but as you can see, the tank itself cannot equip it because it is to make up for the fact that you do not have a tank. So you can kind of like juggle aggro using variant ultimatum. If all you have is healer and DPS, you can kind of like juggle aggro between yourselves if you need to. And then you can use rampart between yourselves as well, in order to compensate for the lack of tank. So that is cool. You do not queue into these through the regular duty finder. They have a special dungeon finder thing assigned to it. And like Yoshi P said, that they are doing more dungeons in future patches, like more variant dungeons. And that to me is when things are going to get much more interesting, right? Because right now you're going to get one dungeon. It'll be super interesting to see what the system is like. But what's going to be even more interesting is when you have like a bunch of dungeons that you can go and do at any given time. And potentially they could even be providing you with different rewards depending on how things work. Maybe they'll even think about doing like modifiers and stuff whenever it comes to the Savage versions of these. We shall see how that works out. That's my Mythic Plus brain already coming in. And you can see here that you're going to be getting the new tomestones. I'm assuming that these are the elegant tomestones of causality or whatever it is called. I talked about these in the previous video. I believe that is what this is, and it looks like you're going to be getting the latest tomes for doing you know, a special dungeon finder. And here you can see the two actions that you have equipped. There's actually a screen that they show where you can select the two different actions that you can get. Again, some roles do not get a certain actions. Like you can see here, DPS does not get access to the variant dart because that is a DPS ability. And you can see all the other abilities here. You can choose both of them, and these are usable. Like if you've done duties that have duty-specific actions, you know how to access these. And then in here, this is like one of the important things. Like you'll see that this is the UI that pops up once you have completed the variant dungeon. And apparently, just like this first one, the Sil something subterranean is going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 different outcomes that you will be able to do throughout the different choices that you make as you are navigating the dungeon, which is pretty cool because even just from like the more casual side of the dungeon, you're going to have reasons to do 12 runs of this dungeon if you choose. Like all of this is probably optional. You know, there's going to be rewards and stuff like that, but I would imagine that this is going to be something that you can do optionally, right? But really cool that there's going to be story elements for 12 different endings, so to speak, to this dungeon. They show us a couple of screen grabs of the dungeon. I purposefully chose not to watch too much of it because I want to experience this stuff in game. And like I've said, when I want to experience things in game, I do not want to watch too much of it. I did bring up this particular screen grab because it shows you how you get to do the selection of the paths that you take and whatnot. And you can see in the map that if you go left, it goes this way. If you go front, it goes that way. And to the right, there's this thing. And you can see that Nanamo is here. Nanamo is somehow related to this particular variant dungeon that we're getting here and is a part of the story. If you have multiple players, you basically get to vote on the route that you are going to be taking. So say you got 4 players here. If 2 players stand in the middle, you know, you're going to end up going to the middle. Although considering that you usually get 4 players, what if 2 players stand on one, 2 players stand on the other one, or if it just like randomly chooses a coin toss or something. But the idea is that you guys get to vote on the direction that you choose to go in the dungeon. This is still like the casual version of the dungeon. You can see Yoshi P fighting a boss here. It was just to show you guys a little bit of that. Like I said, there's going to be 2 bosses, and their abilities are going to differ, even though their models don't differ, depending on the choices that you make throughout the dungeon. So you're going to get the 2 bosses are always going to be the same. At least that was my understanding from the live letter. But even though the 2 bosses don't change, their abilities do, depending on the routes that you take, you know, depending on the things that you trigger as you navigate the dungeon, which is interesting. Very curious to see how different can those fights actually be. There's going to be a mount reward due to the fact that they showed this immediately after the variant dungeon. I'm expecting that this is going to be something you'll be able to get through the regular casual dungeon runs, or maybe it is the Savage mount. I don't know, because it's Japanese. I did check the unofficial translation of Swin again. Big shout out to the Reddit Final Fantasy XIV community for organizing the translations of the live letters. I couldn't really find any indication if this mount comes from the normal version or the Savage version. Wouldn't surprise me if it was the Savage version, so just beware of that. Or maybe even the Criterion version. So, new battle content, Criterion Dungeons. This is kind of like the same thing. Level 90 high difficult challenge for 4-player parties. The way you look at it is there is variant, which is normal mode. There is Criterion, which is extreme. And then there's Criterion Savage. Party must comprise of 1 tank, 1 healer, and 2 DPS. Visually similar to variant dungeons, but overall structure / enemy strength are entirely different. Route is predetermined, so you do not have different routes. Now, the interesting thing here is, even though route is predetermined, I wonder if they will change the route depending on the week. I'm not sure if they talked about this or not. Again, I know that we're getting into very specific stuff, but that's because this is, like I said, this is one of the systems that I'm the most interested in. So I'm wondering if this could be something that you know, every week or so, they can go in, they can change it, be like, okay, so this week you're going to take, like, you know how there's 12 endings to the dungeon when it's in variant mode? What you could do for the Criterion version of it is you could go, okay, week 1, you guys are going to go Route 3. Next week, you guys are going to like Route 6. Next week, going to go like Route 1. And all of these kind of like lead you to different sides of the... I think that would be interesting. But it will be like static for that week because it's going to be more challenging. And like I said, Criterion is almost... I suspect it's going to be like on the same level as like an Extreme or something like that, right? Criterion Dungeon number 1. Another Sylvain Subterranean. And then another Sylvain Subterranean Savage. Now, you cannot tell me that the acronym that this formed is an accident, because this forms ASS. ASS. So, the first Criterion Dungeon is Ass, and then there is Ass Savage. You're gonna go do that Savage Ass. Anyway, another dungeons are high difficult by default, with Savage providing additional challenges. Now, you can queue into the Criterion Dungeon 1. I'm not sure if they mentioned that, right? Yeah. Another Sylvain Subterranean parties of fewer than 4 players supplement via matching. So, basically, you can go in with a friend, and then they will match you with other players to go and do this, because you do need 4 players to go through this one. It does not scale down like the variant one. Normal methods of resurrection are prohibited, but each player is granted limited use of variant Raise 2. All other variant actions are unavailable. So you only get raise possibilities throughout using this variant Raise abilities, but all players get to use it. This leads me to believe there's going to be a whole bunch of deaths. People are going to be dying a lot if every player is going to have what is essentially a battle res. Defeated enemies do not revive after party KO. That means that if you wipe the enemies that you killed so far, it basically makes it so that you can kind of like slowly push your way through the dungeon. If you know, if you have a party that is less experienced and they're struggling with it, they can still kind of like slowly push through the dungeon and then get slammed by the boss potentially. But yeah, that's how the regular version, the extreme version, so to speak, is going to work. Then another Sylvain Subterranean Savage. Pre-formed parties of 4. There is no matchmaking, so you need a pre-made group. All methods of resurrection and variant actions are prohibited. You will not be able to resurrect. All defeated enemies revive after party KO, which means if you wipe, everybody raises back up, kind of like Dark Souls. Pretty cool. Enemies become much stronger if not defeated within a certain time limit. This basically means there is an enrage. Now, I'm assuming that the boss fights act as a checkpoint, because otherwise there wouldn't really be a reason to ever continue the dungeon after the enrage. But I don't know if that is the case or not. Either way, I think that the enrage is really only dangerous if it can happen while you are going through the dungeon, right? Like if you're going through the dungeon and enrage triggers like, oh crap, we really need to push through. Because like if you're in a point where, oh, the enemy's enraged, might as well leave and re-queue, right? And I don't... Again, I'll have to see this in action to really understand, unless, like I said, there is like a checkpoint between bosses, then that might be a reason to try and push through, because like, oh, I don't want to go through the trash all over again and do the first boss in Savage mode again. Let's try to push through this enrage and make it through. But again, I don't know if that is going to be the case or not. But it'll be interesting to see for sure. It'll definitely be interesting to see, and this is like my most requested feature for Final Fantasy XIV, challenging content for small parties. And personally, I'm super excited about it. I'm curious to hear your opinions on this. Are you guys excited about the Criterion Dungeons? Let me know in the comment section below. I just wanted to make a video talking specifically about this feature, because this is definitely one of the things that I'm going to be dedicating a lot of time to. Although this one is not going to be coming with 6.2, this one's 6.25. So 6.2 is going to be like the raid, and I think the new side quests for Tataru and stuff like that, and obviously the new MSQ. So they want to give you time to, you know, get through the MSQ at your own pace, get through the raid, start progging on Savage, and then they drop the 6.25 on you with the Criterion Dungeons and the relic weapons and all of this other stuff. But anyways, let me know if you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, hit the like button, subscribe, bell notification icon, all of that jazz, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.